Interesting TCM and Acupuncture, Part 10. Part 1, Concepts from Different Times Interpreted from an Overhead View. In the past, in the study of acupuncture and moxibustion, it was universally believed that the meridian and collateral system of Chinese medicine was the route which connected all acupoints to the organ system of the body. It was usually erroneously said, first there were acupoints and later there were channels. The essence of this stance is that originally within Chinese medicine, the study of acupoints was discovered first, and only later was the theory of the meridians added as a means to connect them cohesively together. However, in 1973, with the excavation of the Mawangdui archaeological site, it was discovered that there were ancient acupuncture texts, which in fact proved that in reality, Chinese medicine first developed the concept of the meridian system and later added the acupoints as a means to tie them together. These documents, entitled the Foot 11 Channels Moxibustion Classic and the Yin Yang 11 Channels Moxibustion Classic, came to revolutionize our understanding of the nature of the meridian and point system of Chinese medicine. Now we will discuss the key points of this research and look at the earliest fully formed Chinese medicine document, the Yellow Emperor Internal Classic. Then we will return to the discussion of the historical origins of the meridian and acupoint systems. In 1973 in Changsha, at the Mawangdui tomb excavation site, among the many Pre-Qin dynasty books were discovered the medical texts, the Foot and Arm 11 Channels Acupuncture and Moxibustion Classic, and the Yin Yang 11 Channel Acupuncture and Moxibustion Classic. To the present, these are the earliest known documents discussing the meridian system of Chinese medicine, but although they discuss the 12 meridians, they do not discuss acupoints. This has become considered as the origin of the study of the meridian system. In 2012, at Lao Guan Mountain in northern Chengdu, there was discovered a northern Han Dynasty tomb site in which a wooden model used for acupoint location, referred to as the Lao Guan Mountain Acupuncture Man, was located. The Lao Guan Mountain Acupuncture Man was made during the northern Han Dynasty and was 14 centimeters in length, with meridians traveling his entire body and acupoints inscribed. It was very small, well preserved, with channels and points clearly visible, and presented in complex form. This is important because to date, this represents the most intact and most detailed of such acupuncture models. As such, this represents a point of immense value to researchers of Chinese medicine. The Yellow Emperor Internal Classic was transcribed in the 1st century AD and comprised of two texts entitled the Spiritual Pivot and Simple Questions. Simple Questions discusses the foundations of Chinese medicine, while the Spiritual Pivot, which is also called the Needle Classic, is primarily concerned with the 12 main channels and the 8 extraordinary meridians. In total, there are 15 channels that make up the meridian and collateral system. There are also 150 acupoints detailed for use in acupuncture in the text. Experts estimate that the Yellow Emperor Internal Classic did not emerge from one single generation, but instead was a culmination of knowledge about Chinese medicine collected since the Warring States era. It was likely compiled and edited during the Qin and Han dynasties and came into being as a canonical text during the 1st century AD in the Northern Han Dynasty. Below, we will discuss 4 important points of research pertaining to the excavated texts and the Yellow Emperor Internal Classic in order to discover their connection. A. Mawangdui Foot and Shoulder 11 Meridian Moxibustion Classic and the Yin Yang 11 Meridian Moxibustion Classic. At the end of 1973, a tomb in Mawangdui in Changsha was discovered to contain many ancient books, including many medical texts, which included the Foot and Shoulder 11 Meridian Moxibustion Classic, the Yin Yang 11 Meridian Moxibustion Classic, the Method of Differentiating Pulses, the Yin Yang Meridian Death Inquiry, the 50 Disease, Abandon Grains and Consume the Breath, the Daoyin Diagram, the Book of Nurturing Life, discussion of treatments, and the book of raising the fetus. Among them, the Foot and Shoulder 11 Meridians Moxibustion Classic and Yin Yang 11 Meridians Moxibustion Classic cover the topic of the 12 meridians of the body and how to use moxibustion to treat their illnesses. They are relatively similar to the Channels and Meridians chapters of the Spiritual Pivot text of Neijing, and the Yin Yang 11 Meridians Moxibustion Classic more or less contains the same meaning as the one found in the Spiritual Pivot. However, these two medical texts have 11 meridians, lacking the Zhui Yin meridian of the hand. Among the concepts discussed about the meridian pathways and treatments, there are some important discrepancies from the Spiritual Pivot, which includes the concept that each of the meridians travel from the forelimbs and converge in the heart. Also, this text has no mention of acupuncture and only discusses methods of moxibustion. As such, it's called the Moxibustion Classic. Neither of the two excavated classics discuss the Zangfu organs in the same way as the Spiritual Pivot, or how the external and internal aspects of the channels interact with the Zangfu, and only discuss either the channels according to their location or their yin-yang interpretation. Thus, the naming convention of the Foot and Shoulder 11 channel Moxibustion Classic and the yin-yang 11 channel Moxibustion Classic. As a result, we have reason to believe that these two texts indeed predate the Spiritual Pivot and as such represent the earliest known documentation on the subject of the channels and meridians. This is a profound resource for the progress of Chinese medicine research. B. The Jiang family mountain bamboo slips. In December 1983, until the following January, in the Jingzhou district of Jiangxing, Hubei province, there was discovered 3 Han Dynasty tombs on the Jiang family mountain. They dated to the Northern Han Dynasty in approximately 128 BC and were meant to intern a minor government official. Within the tomb were discovered 1,236 perfectly preserved bamboo slips, which included a calendar chart, books on law, the Book of the Meridians, the Book of Mathematics, books on Daoyin, and more. Among them, the Book of Meridians discussed the topic of ancient acupuncture and moxibustion. In total, 66 slips. It is in total 66 slips and is split into 2 topics. 1, the names of the 60 illnesses and locations from head to foot. The meridian pathways and attendant illnesses. The Meridian Classic discusses illnesses from head to foot and contains many of the same illnesses as the 52 illnesses found in the Ma Wang Dui excavation scripts. Many of its ideas about the channels and the time of death can be found in the Spiritual Pivot, so we can see how these ancient texts mutually influenced one another. If the Book of Meridians had not been unearthed, it would be believed that there totaled 4 acupuncture and moxibustion texts at the Ma Wang Dui, which included the Foot and Shoulder 11 Meridians Moxibustion Classics, the Yin Yang 11 Meridians Moxibustion Classic, the Classic of Pulse Taking, and the Yin Yang Meridian Time of Death document. However, after excavating the Jiang family mountain slips and discovering the Book of Meridians, it was realized that it's more or less similar to the other texts, and each of them can be used to connect the others. Thus, it's now believed that there were a total of 2 medical texts at Ma Wang Dui. Furthermore, at Ma Wang Dui, there was a second version of the Yin Yang 11 Meridians Moxibustion Classic with similar contents. This text was also found at the Jiang family mountain and is intact in full form in the Book of Meridians. Because of this, it's believed that the Book of Meridians and Yin Yang 11 Meridians Moxibustion Classic are in fact of the same origin. The Jiang family mountain slips and the texts at Ma Wang Dui help us to better understand Chinese medicine's progress during the Han Dynasty and clarify many of the difficult to answer questions surrounding the early history of Chinese medicine. C. The 2 meridian models at Baoshan. In spring 1933, in Maoyang City, Yongxing Village, Sichuan Province, there was excavated an acupuncture meridian model at Shuanggao Mountain. It stood 28.1 centimeters tall and was covered in meridians, but did not include acupoints. The left hand and both legs were destroyed, but the body had 12 meridians, including the 3 hand yin meridians, 3 hand yang meridians, 3 foot yin meridians, and 3 foot yang meridians. The Shuanggao Mountain acupuncture model was found before the text at Ma Wangdui and already had the Han Zhuiyin meridian. The meridians on this model were connected at the head and followed along the arms, passing along the center of the arm to the middle finger. This central meridian had no branch, and the left and right were identical. The M2 excavation site contained 4 weaving looms, 1 large and 3 small. Each was meticulously painted. This represents China's only discovery of Han Dynasty weaving looms and is China's only complete excavation of fully intact bamboo looms. In the second tomb was found a perfectly preserved acupuncture model without any sign of historical degradation. It had 10 lines of red and white traveling the course of its limbs and body, converging on its head. There is no question that the painted lines represent the meridian system of the body. Wooden lacquer model named Lacquer Man was found in the third tomb at Lao Guan Mountain in the Han funerary mound M3 site, as pictured encircled in red. The medical texts found in the Han Dynasty funerary site contain theoretical concepts and treatment modalities which originate in the Warring States era and are derived from the disciples of the famous Chinese physician Bian Cui. They contain a complete and accurate account of medical differentiation methods. Within the texts are the terms Bi Xi said is used as a phonetic loanword for Bian Cui, indicating that the teachings in the text were derived from the medical documents left behind by his disciples. Among the bamboo slips were books documenting diagnosis, pulse taking, color, and methods of observing the health of the body. This aligns precisely with the 4 diagnostic methods of observation, listening and asking, and palpating of the classic of difficulties. There were also books discussing differentiation of illness patterns in the 11 meridians. Aside from information on Moxibustion, there were also books on the topic of needling, which list 10 methods of needling to cure particular illnesses. There were also prescription books with hundreds of recipes, and many useful compounds reflected a correct understanding of the fundamental rules of prescription. There are many methods of treatment presented in the text. Among the external treatment methods, stone methods and pulling methods, among the diseases contained in the text were found internal, external, female, pediatric, 5 sense organs, bone injury, and other methods. There was also a veterinary text on the treatment of horses. This is China's oldest veterinary text. The wooden lacquer meridian and acupoint model. The wooden lacquer meridian and acupoint model stands 14 centimeters tall and is preserved in its original form with no defects. The 5 orifices of the face are precise, and the head and limbs are accurate in proportion and scale. The white and red lines, which represent the meridians and acupoints, are clear and distinct. The meridian and acupoint lacquer model was found in the second southern cave of the M3 site. It is a wooden model, nude, upright, hands and arms hang to the sides of the body. The 5 fingers are straight, palms facing forward, legs held together and standing straight. The head is without hair, and the eyebrows, eyes, nose, mouth, and ears are all clear and in proportion. The body is painted in black lacquer and covered in complex meridian lines with acupoints. Each acupoint is accompanied by text. It is roughly 14 centimeters in length and 2.6 centimeters in width. The feet are 2.5 centimeters long and 2.6 centimeters wide. About the Lacquer Man. The small lacquer model found in the 3rd burial site at Lao Guan Mountain is believed by researchers to have been used as a model to locate the meridians and acupoints of the body. The model has thus been given the name Meridian and Acupoint Lacquer Man. Funerary site at Lao Guan Mountain was for the northern Hanjing emperor and is a tomb site from the era of the Han Dynasty martial emperors. The lacquer meridian model found in the excavation probably came from an earlier era. It was 14 centimeters tall, the 5 orifices of the face were accurate in detail, and the head, arms, and legs were correct in proportion and scale. The red and white lines on the body represented meridians and acupoints, and were inscribed with words such as heart, lung, kidney, basin, and so on. This precious artifact represents the earliest and most complete model of its kind found to date. 2. Meridian and acupoint lacquer model meridian markings. 1. Lacquer Man red lines. The meridian at acupoint Lacquer Man was covered in 22 red lines. They traveled both sides of the body, following along symmetrically with 11 lines on each side. Among the 11 lines on each side were 5 lines running vertically along the front of the body, 4 lines running down the back, and 2 lines on the side of the body. 2. The white lines of the Lacquer Man. The meridians and points Lacquer Man also has 29 white lines inscribed on it, which include 3 horizontal lines and 26 vertical lines. These 29 thin white lines and 22 thick red lines follow the entire length of the body. In the past, it was believed the Lacquer Man found at Mianyang Shuangbao Mountain in Sichuan at the Han Dynasty excavation site were the earliest evidence of models featuring meridians and acupoints for the purpose of the study of acupuncture. However, after the discovery of the meridian and acupoint Lacquer Man at Lao Guan Mountain, it helped us to fill in missing knowledge in the model found at the Sichuan site due to its perfectly preserved full body lines and markings. The meridian and acupoint Lacquer Man discovered at Lao Guan Mountain was also more complex and intricate in detail than the model found at Mianyang Shuangbao Mountain. 3. Acupuncture and Moxa Lacquer Man markings. Part 1. The original photos show the points engraved on the body. After the excavation of the funerary site at Lao Guan Mountain, the model was immediately obtained by the local office for protection of ancient artifacts and carefully documented by archaeological experts. In total, the photos of the Lacquer Man include 1 photo of the front, 1 of the back, and 1 of the sides of the body, and 1 of the head. In total, they're labeled below in images 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and 2.4. The measurements of acupoints of the Lacquer Man. The meridian and acupoint Lacquer Man has 106 clearly inscribed acupoints, including 43 paired points, which are equal on both sides, and 20 individual points. Among the 109 acupoints, the head and neck have 6 paired acupoints and are located with 1 on the face, 1 on the ears, 2 on the back of the head, 1 on the neck. There were 5 individual points, with 1 located on the back of the head, 4 on the ears. The torso has 8 paired points, which are split into 1 point on the abdomen, 4 on the back, and 3 on the shoulders. There are 10 individual points, with 6 on the abdomen and 4 on the back. The upper arm has 11 paired acupoints, 5 on the front, 4 on the back, and 2 on the sides. There are 2 independent points on the upper shoulder of the left side and the upper back shoulder of the right side. The lower arm has 18 paired points, including 70 on the front, 8 on the back, and 3 on the sides. There are 3 independent points on the front of the right side of the lower leg, the back right leg of the lower leg, and the side of the lower right leg. Tentative conclusions. The body of the Lacquer Man has 106 acupoints, which are mostly paired opposites, and there is a difference between the number of points and their locations with those of the internal classic. Comparative analysis was carried out to verify the 106 inscribed points of the Lao Guan Mountain Lacquer Man. In total, there are 36 paired points and 14 single points with names that positively compare with current research. There was 1 point on the abdomen paired and 4 individual points on the abdomen. 1 paired point on the upper arm, 1 single point on the lower arm, and 2 paired points on the back of the lower arm, which are different from There is also 1 paired point on the shoulder, 2 paired points on the back of the lower arm, and 1 single point on the head, which are not recorded in any documents. The majority of the points were inscribed on the white lines, well there were 3 paired points not on the white lines. The red lines were fewer and more simple, with fewer connections. Thus, there were fewer points carved on the red lines. The 12 channels each had points marked on them, while the red meridian did not have any markings. In total, it appears that there were only 1 extraordinary point included. 4. The Lao Guan Mountain Lacquer Man is the earliest known example of an acupuncture model. Acupoints were first recorded in writing and only later transferred into drawings. Only later they were made into standing models. So these 3 major genres serve as our guides. Usually, the early acupoint drawings are known as Mingtang drawings. We know for a fact that the standard for these acupuncture drawings was already well understood by the Han Dynasty, because Zhang Zhongjing recorded them in a passage which reads, "Those who wish to use Moxa must know how to find the correct areas to apply it, the names of the cavities they wish to dredge, and must know how to correctly apply it. These things can be found in the dredging techniques diagram and can inform people of how to understand twin measurements, how much Moxa to apply, and how to dredge the meridians." After the creation of these drawings, there was great progress in assisting students in the learning of the correct locations of the acupoints. The Mingtang diagrams came about as a result of historical necessity. Acupuncture meridian models came about after the development of documents and illustrations were already mature. Although there are many historical examples of acupoint models, such as the Northern Song Dynasty Tongren, created by Wang Weiyi, each of the different generations of model were all very different, and it was not possible to decipher how they developed a consistent theory within Chinese medicine that could cross multiple generations. The Mianyang Shuangdao Mountain Lacquer Man excavation assisted research in filling the blank spaces, but because it had no acupoints carved into it, it served as a problem for future researchers. Finally, after the discovery of the model at Lao Guan Mountain, it assisted researchers in deciphering the development of these models and gave us a clearer view into the nature of early thought about the understanding of acupoints in Chinese medicine. Because it's the earliest and most complete model of its kind, it assists us greatly in better understanding classical Chinese medicine documents and their explanation of acupoints and meridians. 2. Key points on how the excavations have assisted in the research of the theory of channels and meridians. Meridian, collateral, and acupoint theory is an important part of Chinese medicine and the essence of the theory of acupuncture and treatment. Meridians and collaterals have interior, exterior, superficial, and deep, and can be summarized as the 5 organs within and the 5 body aspects on the exterior: skin, flesh, vessel, joint, and bone, and the 5 sense organs: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and mouth. All of these things naturally function together. The meridians and collaterals move qi and blood, nourishing the entire body, thus staving off illness and protecting the entire body. These ideas began to take form during the Warring States period, and with the discovery of Ma Wangdui at Changsha and the Zhang family mountain tomb slats, as well as the Mianyang Shuangdao Mountain medical artifacts and Chengdu Lao Guan Mountain acupuncture lacquer man, we have discovered that in the pre-Qin era, before Neijing was compiled, there was already a deep and sophisticated understanding of Chinese medicine. In the spring of 1973 at Sichuan Mianyang City, Yongxing Village, Shuangdao Mountain, the excavation of the Channel and Meridian Lacquer Man brought about considerable interest in the research community. The figure allows us to understand the structure of Han Dynasty ideas about the channel and meridian system, but because there are no markings of acupoints and the left hand and both legs are broken, the information derived from it was not complete. Most importantly, the 12 channels discovered in the text at Ma Wangdui and the markings on the lacquer man are considerably different from those discussed in the Yellow Emperor internal classic. In the ancient books, the Han Taiyang channel lacks a branch channel and is different from Neijing, which says there's a branch meridian which runs from the Chui pen up the neck. In the ancient texts, the Taiyang bladder channel has 1 connecting meridian when Neijing says that there are 3 connected meridians. These examples are obvious differences between the texts. The Shuangdao Mountain Lacquer Man also contains the Zhui Yin channel and the Chui pen small foot 3 Yin channel, which are different from those recorded in Neijing. Thus, it is apparent that before the Qin dynasty, the development of knowledge about the channels and points was not entirely clear. Aside from this, there's also the problem that many points either have the same name but are located in different areas, or have different names but are located in the same area as those listed in Neijing. Because Neijing is considered as an essential theoretical text of Chinese medicine, and because there are so many differences with these older texts, more research is required to develop this field. 2013 excavation of the tomb complex at Lao Guan Mountain in Sichuan was the first opportunity for researchers of meridians and acupoints to observe this type of ancient model in fully intact form. Because of its intricacy and clarity, we were able to derive that it both possesses a similarity to the concepts presented in the Neijing, as well as its own unique features. We may also recognize it as being close to the origin of the study of the acupoints of the human body. 3. There were channels and later points hypothesis. Most of the Chinese medicine documents and artifacts from the Warring States and Qin Dynasty era, which have been discovered, have been researched deeply, and China's early channel and acupoint theory has been disseminated. As such, they can now serve as a precious model of assistance for the future development of acupuncture and moxibustion. But there are still a few questions. The books contained at the Malongdui funerary site and the material found at the Jiang family mountain were relatively simple in their analysis of the channels and meridians, with few branches and no branches connecting them. The branches were very few, and the channels, as well as the collaterals, have no relationship with the internal organs. This is obviously a very early original text, since its ideas are not fully developed as in later generations. On the other hand, the Han Dynasty in Neijing has 12 channels that travel around and around without breaking. There are many branches, and the majority of the meridians are totally different. The matter of how the channel concept gradually developed ought to be the primary concern of future researchers. Furthermore, the channel and meridian Lacquer Man at the Mianyang Shuangbao Mountain excavation site shows the movement of the channels along the body and fills in many of the places in which the ancient texts are not sufficient. It's also obvious from this statue, which only has meridians and no acupoints, that the theory which stipulates that there were first acupoints and later meridians is obviously false. Typically in the acupuncture research community, it's believed that the channels connect the acupoints to the organs. So hitherto, it's been a common theory that the acupoints appeared before the meridians. Even though it's not possible to fully understand all of the aspects pertaining to the time before the evolution of acupoints and the time after, no less, it does help us move forward one step in our research of this topic. Next, it's important to differentiate whether the meridians travel toward the heart or whether they wind continuously around the body. In this case, it would have made it impossible for successive generations to understand the early texts if they had no method to help them clarify this concept. The early Qin and Han Dynasty silk texts found at Malongdui illustrate the concept that the meridians travel from the heart, while the later Neijing focuses on the unbroken movement of the channels around the body. These two different theories should be compared and accounted for in order to move the research forward on this topic. 4. Using the knowledge of successive generations to understand the historical traces of the study of channels and acupoints. Early Chinese historical development is divided into two eras, Pre-Qin and Qin Han. These are the times when the study of meridian and acupoints took their form. The Pre-Qin era, which traced from 2100 BC to 221 BC, encompasses the time before the Qin dynasty and comprises the ancient past of China until 220 BC, when Qin Shi Huang united the 6 nations of China into one country. The pre-Qin era included the original societies of China up to the Warring States era. This time was when the first aspects of Chinese civilization took form, and it includes the Xia, Shang, Western Zhou, Spring and Autumn, and Warring States eras, respectively. The Qin dynasty began from 221 BC until 206 BC, lasting only 14 years. From today's date in 2020, the Qin dynasty is already 2,241 years in the past. Just a correction there, this is being read in 2021. So it is now 2,242 years in the past. Han Dynasty, which lasted from 202 to 220 AD, was divided into the Western and Eastern Han. The Western Han lasted for 196 years, while the Eastern Han lasted for Eastern Han and Western Han lasted for a total of 406 years. In 1973, the excavation of acupuncture documents at the Ma Wang Dui funerary complex is believed to be originally derived from no later than the Qin Han era and likely to have been recorded around the 3rd century BC, being compiled into a book in the Pre-Qin period. These documents are the earliest record of meridians and moxa treatment in Chinese literature and report a total of 11 channels which wrap around the body, as well as including a method of using moxa to recover from illness. The documents both state that the heart is the central point through which all meridians converge and do not include any relationship between the channels and organs or surface and deep aspects of the body. They only use location and in yin and yang theory to discuss the meridians. Thus, the documents are entitled the Arm and Foot 11 Meridians in Moxa Classic and the Yin Yang 11 Meridians Moxa Classic. 10 years after the excavation at Ma Wang Dui, the Jiang family mountain bamboo slips were found. These are believed by experts to be from the 2nd year of the reign of Empress Lu in 186 BC, or slightly after. The Book of Meridians discusses 11 channels with relatively simple pathways. The bulk of the meridians travel through the heart and are basically the same as those contained in the Yin Yang 11 Meridians Moxa text. Another decade later, in 1993, the discovery of the Lacquer Meridian model at the excavation site at Shuangbao Mountain in Mianyang, and 20 years later, the discovery of a Lacquer Acupuncture and Moxa model at Lao Guan Mountain in Sichuan are both from the Western Han Dynasty. In total, the time lapse between the Foot and Arm 11 Meridians Moxibustion Classic, Yin Yang 11 Meridians Moxibustion Classic, and these other findings was 400 years. The Shuangbao Mountain Meridian Lacquer Man also has no acupoints, only channels and meridian. There are also no markings denoting acupoints on its body, and it's also missing its left hand and both feet are damaged. The Lao Guan Acupuncture and Moxibustion Man is covered in channels and has clearly marked acupoints. It's more carefully designed and better preserved. Because of its special features, it ought to be the case that it was built after the Lacquer Man at Shuangbao Mountain. The Yellow Emperor internal classic document, the Spiritual Pivot, which is also called the Acupuncture Classic, seems to have been compiled roughly 500 years after these earlier texts. 5. Given what we know, what is our best guess at the likely trajectory of Chinese medicine history? The study of acupuncture and moxibustion has come to maturity over a very long period of history. Acupuncture has existed in China from the earliest times, and it's most likely that it evolved as a form of stone needling tool, which emerged from the Neolithic age. Eventually, it transformed into the use of bone needles, bamboo needles, golden needles, and so on. After the discovery of metallurgy, the use of metal needles advanced considerably. Moxibustion must have gradually been discovered after the discovery of the use of fire, when people experimented with the use of fire on various natural items. Once moxibustion took form, it became a vital part of Chinese medical treatment due to its ability to repair people's bodies by following along the channels and meridians, gradually bringing people back to health. Judging from the historical trajectory of the archaeological findings from the Pre-Qin documents found at Ma Wang Dui up to the Han Dynasty documents found at Lao Guan Mountain, that there was a gradual refinement of ideas about the structure of meridians and acupoints from the end of the Warring States period until the Mid-Han Dynasty. We can also see that all of these texts and models are predicated on an early system of Chinese medicine, which placed the heart at the center of the meridian system. The characteristics of these early texts and lacquer models predate later constructs in Chinese medicine, such as the Tongren acupuncture model, by more than 1,000 years. And it would appear that the Yellow Emperor internal classic is the divergent point at which earlier ideas were synthesized into a new understanding of Chinese medicine. Because the Yellow Emperor internal classic is often referred to by experts as the acupuncture classic, we can see how early ideas about moxibustion were gradually synthesized with the acupuncture to build one cohesive school of thought. The synthesized ideas in the Yellow Emperor internal classic went on to become the essential structure of all future research on acupuncture and moxibustion. By all accounts, ancient Chinese people have been researching the meridian system of the body for at least 2,300 years. Because of the unique archaeological findings discussed in this presentation, we can see how these ideas gradually changed over time, from only including 11 meridians to include the use of acupoints. These acupoints were not only fully elaborated on until the Yellow Emperor internal classic, which has a total of 160 points. Ultimately, we can see this information we can use this information to answer the question, which came first, the channels or the points? The answer is clearly that the idea of the channels predated the introduction of acupoints by several hundred years, and thus we can definitively say that the channels came before the points. The synthesized ideas in the Yellow Emperor internal classic went on to become the essential structure of all future research on acupuncture and moxibustion. Summary. By all accounts, ancient Chinese people have been researching the meridian system of the body for at least 2,300 years. Because of the unique archaeological findings discussed in this presentation, we can see how these ideas gradually changed over time, only including 11 meridians to include the use of acupoints. These acupoints were not fully elaborated until the Yellow Emperor internal classic, upon which a total of 160 points were listed. Ultimately, we can use this information to answer the question of which came first, the channels or the points. The answer is clearly that the idea of channels predated the introduction of acupoints by several hundred years, and thus we can definitively say that the channels came before the points. Further thinking, it seems likely that the ancient Chinese people first learned to use fire sometime between 5,000 and 3,000 years ago, and after using it for many generations, it ultimately came to be used for medical treatments focused on the use of combustion of Moxa herbs for use in dredging the meridians. It is most likely that the original method of transmission of this knowledge was in oral teachings between master and disciple, so it's not possible to verify the exact date of inception of use of mugwort as a medicinal herb in the moxibustion treatment. The earliest textual evidence of these treatments come from the silk texts and bamboo slips, which date roughly to 2,300 years ago. Because of the nature of moxibustion is to pass along the channel, it seems obvious that the origin of the meridian system in Chinese text must have come about as a result of Moxa treatments. Following on the text came the Qin Han era lacquer models, and it was only 200 years later in the late Han period that the Yellow Emperor internal classic was compiled. The total time lapse between the foot and arm 11 Meridian Moxa Classic and the Yin Yang 11 Meridian Moxa Classic and the Yellow Emperor Internal Classic is 500 years, stretching from the Warring States era to the Han Dynasty. This should be viewed through the lens of transformation, evolution, and collection of experience in the ancient medical field. These things occurred at the same time that similar trends were happening in Chinese cosmology, calendar studies, farming, and other fields. And we should view all of them and the Yellow Emperor Internal Classic as absorbing the essence of Chinese philosophy, which by that time had already developed the concepts of qi as the origin of being, the separation of forms into yin and yang, the 5 elements. This early Chinese empiricism relied on observation and comparing phenomenon, contemplation as a means of understanding and estimating the relative nature of constant and temporary phenomena. These principles of study make up the core of the philosophy at the heart of Chinese medicine and have been integral aspects of its study since its inception. In the heavenly pivot, we can see how observing the outside to know the inside and the surface of the body represents the internal organs focuses on the use of moxibustion on the channels as a means by which to connect the internal organs through the surface of the body. This led to the development of the idea that the relationship of the organs in viscera, surface, and exterior. It also went on to inform the ideas of the action of qi, blood, and fluids. This further informed ideas about the branches and roots of meridians, the 4 C's, and other concepts which explain the movement of qi through the upper, lower, left, and right of the body, helping to explain the movement of the 12 meridians and how blood flows through the body. It is thus interesting to know how the essential character of the hand tai yin lung meridian, which runs along the arm, is similar to the arm tai yin meridian of the foot and arm 11 meridian moxibustion classic. We can see how over time this meridian was gradually viewed through the metric of viewing the outer to understand the inner and pondering a topic to come to a realization. In order to derive the knowledge that this meridian in fact has a relationship with the lung, allowing it to ultimately take form as the hand tai yin lung meridian of the Neijing. I believe that the sensation along the meridian pathway is related to the function and the illustrations of the meridians and collaterals and their modeling system. Thank you for watching.